I got into it accidentally. I was covering campaigns and wanted to add up all the money that some local candidates had gotten, and was doing it by hand. And the receptionist at the little newspaper that I worked at said, you could do that better if you did it in a spreadsheet. And I was like, well, what's a spreadsheet? So she taught me this spreadsheet called QuatraPro, which is way before Microsoft Excel. And she showed me how to put the numbers in, and I was like, wow, this is cool, So that was the start, just typing in numbers in a spreadsheet. That I think QuatraPro is still around, but that's how I got started. Well, the thing is, we use numbers all the time, and I think people get nervous when they're structured. But, I mentioned in a session today, when someone asks, well, what's the temperature? We say 21, or someone says, well, what time is it? It's 10:30 or 2100. We use math all the time, so we just freak out when someone asks us to compare this number versus that number. But it's the same thing, because that's all we're doing. When we say 21, we're giving people we're telling people that as compared to something else. So that's what I try to get across, that you don't need to be afraid of this because you do it every day. You just aren't aware that you're doing it every day. Well, the thing is to not just show the one incident that this happened, or what you would call sort of the episodic thing, but to show the more systemic problems that are happening. And so I could have done a great story about this one lady who died because of bed rails, but I thought, well, maybe this is happening to other people. So what's the best way to illustrate that? And the best way to illustrate that is to try to find out, well, how is this stuff reported? And once you find out how it's reported, then you can look at the numbers holistically and show that this is not just one incident, but 500 different incidents. So I try to use the numbers to show the big picture, but to always keep it as a narrative and not to overwhelm the story with a bunch of numbers. Again, I think you have to know how the data is collected, because all data is good and all data is bad. It depends on how it's collected. Because, give an example, I mentioned this earlier to people, like how many people are in South Africa, how many people are in the U.S. Well, officially in the U.S. there's about 330 million people according to the census. Well, the census was done in 2010. So are there 330 million people there? There's probably more. So you just have to know what the data is, how it's collected, and just say what you have. You can't make it say more than what it is. And the other thing about data is you don't have to drown in it. I always go into a story with a story idea. I don't fish around in the data trying to find a story. I have a story idea that I want to work on, and I use the data to illustrate that. Well, I think it does. I don't personally do it myself because, I've got tons of people at the times where I work to do that. But I think it does add to the story because, you can show a number, but then I think if you show it as a bar chart or a pie chart, it shows people compared to what, and that gives them some sense of scale. And I think that's very useful. But I do think there's a tendency to go overboard with data visualization too, and what some people would just call data porn, where you just, because you have the data, you just do it. So I think we need a good balance of having data that actually illustrates things that we're trying to show people versus just putting up stuff just because we have it.